The first light of morning spilled through the glass-paneled kitchen, casting golden flecks across the marble countertops. Amara stood barefoot, wrapped in her navy robe, humming something low and warm as she poured coffee into two mismatched mugs with the chipped rim. Hers with the faded Black Lives Matter sticker peeling at the edge. Jonathan Hale watched her from the doorway, suitcase by his side, tie still untied. There was a rhythm to mornings like this, quiet, effortless, threaded with a kind of intimacy that didn't need words. Her smile was soft but sharp, like she knew something he didn't. It was always that way. "You'll miss your flight," she said, sliding him his mug without looking up. "I don't care," he replied. Stepping into her space, she leaned into him, resting her head briefly against his chest. "Liar," she murmured, but she let him linger. He bent down, kissed the spot just below her ear, then her temple, then her mouth. Her lips were still warm from the coffee. "Text me when you land," she said. "I always do. Even when you forget," smiled. That crooked half-smile she used to tease him about. "This time I won't." She touched his cheek, tongue tracing the stubble he hadn't shaved. "Go. Change the world," she whispered. That was the last thing she said to him. By noon, he was in a Manhattan boardroom, pitching to investors who smelled like leather and old money. His phone had buzzed twice. The third time he stepped into the hallway and answered. A flat, practiced voice. "Officer, something. There's been an accident. A collision." She didn't make it. Jonathan didn't remember hanging up, didn't remember the sound he made. But later, he would remember the silence that followed, the kind that wasn't empty but hollowed, like something vital had been scooped out. They said it was fast. The impact was severe. No one else was injured. No foul play suspected. 3 days later, her mother, who hadn't spoken to Amara in over a year, insisted on immediate cremation. Her wishes, she said stiffly, eyes glassy, voice clipped. Jonathan tried to argue, tried to slow it down. But her family moved with a precision he couldn't keep up with. The funeral was scheduled without him. The obituary ran with his name missing. The urn was delivered to him in a box wrapped in brown paper. No ceremony, no goodbye. He sat on the floor of their bedroom that night, staring at the closed container. The city roared outside their window, uninterrupted. Her favorite scarf still hung over the back of her chair. Her book lay open on the nightstand. Pages fanned like it had been left mid-thought. Everything smelled like her. Bergamot shea butter, peppermint tea. Grief didn't crash. It leaked in slowly, like a house filling with smoke. Something was wrong. He didn't know what, but it curled in his gut, heavy and slow. She would have told him if something had happened. She would have fought. She wasn't someone who vanished. She left footprints. Jonathan rose, walked to the window, and stared out at the skyline. For the first time in years, it felt unfamiliar, like a place he didn't belong. In the stillness, the words came back to him, barely above a whisper. "Go change the world." Ah! But how do you change the world when the one person who believed you could is gone? Rain fell in fine, silvery threads as the mourners gathered beneath a canopy of black umbrellas. The cemetery was slick with mud, puddles pooling between gravestones. A cold wind moved through the trees, tugging at hems and coats. Whispering secrets only the dead could hear, Jonathan stood apart, a few feet from the tented area where Amara's family sat. Her mother, Evelyn Ross, sat straight-backed in a charcoal dress and wide-brimmed hat, her lips a flat line, her gaze trained on the closed casket, like it might betray her. He had arrived early, hoping to speak, offer words, to say something that might honor Amara, but when he approached Evelyn with a folded piece of paper in his hand, she didn't even glance at it. "You won't speak today," she said, eyes hard. "You've said enough." He blinked. "I was her husband." "I deserve you don't deserve anything," she cut in. "You were her choice, not her blood. You loved the version of her that didn't threaten you, that kept you comfortable." Round them heads turned. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp, cutting through the rain like glass. "You never understood what she went through. And now you want to play the grieving widower?" Evelyn's voice trembled, but not with sorrow. With rage, Jonathan stepped back, breath caught in his throat. What are you talking about? She looked him in the eye, then really looked, and something behind her composure cracked. You don't know half the war she fought every day? She said, and you didn't ask. Then she turned her back on him, just like that. The final dismissal. He watched as the ceremony moved forward without him. The preacher spoke in soft, reverent tones. One of Amara's cousins read a poem. There were murmured sobs. Evelyn placed a single white rose on the casket. No one called his name. No one asked him to stand. When the casket was lowered into the ground, it was as if a door had shut, and he was on the wrong side. Afterward, wandered the edge of the gathering, trying to find familiar faces. A few of Amara's law school friends were there, women he'd seen at dinner parties, charity events. They offered tight, polite nods. One turned away mid-step. Another murmured something to the person beside her, and they both looked elsewhere. He stood in the rain until his coat clung to him. It's like a second skin. Alone, uninvited in her grief. That night, back in the apartment, he sat in the silent sheed, left behind, and tried to remember when the distance began. How many times had she come home quiet? How often had he dismissed her exhaustion as just stress? He thought he had known her. But now, the question pulsed louder than ever. What had she? Never told him? The apartment was too quiet? Every step Jonathan took echoed soft thuds on hardwood where laughter used to live. It had been a week since the funeral, but her things remained untouched, as if she might return and scold him for moving her books or misfolding her scarves. He couldn't sleep. The couch, the bed, even the floor all felt wrong without her. That morning, just after dawn, he began sorting. Slowly, reverently, her side of the closet smelled like lavender and cedar. Her favorite scarf, a deep maroon silk with gold threads, still held the faintest trace of her perfume. He pressed it to his face until the scent faded. The bookshelf was last. Dozens of titles on civil rights law, black history, radical feminism. He dusted them gently, one by one. Then he noticed it wedged behind a row of old case files. Wrapped in tissue, a small, leather-bound journal. He hesitated, opening. It felt like crossing a line, but grief has a gravity all its own. March 3rd, I didn't say anything today. When Marcus asked if I was the diversity hire, I laughed. That laugh I give when I feel like screaming. He thinks it's a compliment, they all do. I feel like I'm shrinking. Every day. Smaller. April 7th, someone followed me after the protest. Black SUV. No plates. It idled at the corner of my street for 10 minutes. Called the precinct. They told me it was probably just a coincidence. Jonathan's hands trembled. May 2nd, I wore makeup today to cover it. Just a bruise. Just a misunderstanding in a parking garage. He said I looked like someone else. Like that lawyer who won the Taylor case. Flipping the page, something fluttered out a photograph. Grainy, taken in a bathroom mirror. Amara's face was turned slightly to the side. Her eye was swollen, darkened. A purpling bruise bloomed across her cheekbone. Jonathan sat down hard on the edge of the bed, breath shallow. When had this happened? Never said a word. Her voice in the journal wasn't bitter, was exhausted. Each entry like a breath she wasn't allowed to take out loud. She had shielded him. From all of it, the last entry was dated just 5 days before her death. June 10th, if anything happens to me, it won't be random. I've made enemies by naming things others wanted hidden. They smile to my face, but I feel it. Something's coming. Jonathan closed the journal, his fingers pressing against the leather, like he could still feel her. Pulse beneath it, the creeping dread that had taken root at the funeral now flowered into something darker. She hadn't just lived a double life, she'd been hunted in it. Jonathan stood before the glass tower of Weldon and Morris, Amara's old firm, watching the revolving doors spin with precision. It was sleek, clinical, and deeply familiar. He had walked these halls with her once for a holiday mixer. Back then, it felt prestigious. Now, it felt like a mausoleum. Inside the lobby gleamed polished marble floors, chrome fixtures, and the hollow thud of heels on tile. He approached the receptionist's desk, trying to keep his voice even. "I'm here to speak with someone." "About Amara Ross. I'm her husband." The woman blinked slowly. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," he replied. "But someone here knew her. I need to talk to them." She typed something, lips pressed thin. "Mr. Carpenter will see you." He waited 15 minutes before being ushered into a conference room with glass walls and no warmth. Leon Carpenter. Senior partner walked in with a plastic smile and extended his hand like this was a quarterly review. "Mr. Hale, I'm terribly sorry for your loss. Amara was a bright talent. Very promising." Jonathan didn't shake his hand. "She worked here for 6 years, he said flatly. "I want to know what she was working on before she died." Leon's smile faltered. "I'm afraid that's privileged information. Her cases were confidential. She was my wife," Jonathan snapped. "Someone threatened her. Someone hurt her. You think confidentiality matters more than that?" Leon folded his hands calmly. "We take our staff's safety seriously." "If there had been any legitimate threat, there was," Jonathan cut in. "She documented it in her journal." "You didn't notice anything? No one did?" The silence was dense. "She kept to herself," Leon said finally. "Didn't always want help, even when it was offered." Jonathan stood. "Maybe she stopped expecting you to give it." As he turned to leave, a soft voice called from the hallway. "Mr. Hale?" A young man, early 20s, slight frame, nervous eye, stepped forward. "Yalin Morris, and turned under Amara last spring." Jonathan nodded. "Can we talk?" They slipped into a side office, smaller and more cluttered. Yalin shut the door behind them, then checked twice that it clicked shut. "She was onto something big," he whispered. "Last case she was digging into wasn't assigned to her. She picked it up herself. Something about doctored evidence. Repeated stops in black neighborhoods. Excessive force complaints getting buried." "Was it about the 44th precinct?" Jonathan asked. Jalen blinked, startled. "Yeah. How did you?" "She wrote about it." Yalin lowered his voice even further. "She was scared, sir. But she wouldn't stop. They warned her. I saw one of the letters, typed unsigned, slipped under her office door. She locked it in her briefcase and told me to pretend I never saw it." Jonathan felt his throat tighten. Did anyone else know? Maybe Yolan said, but no one said anything. Around here, silence is survival. Jonathan looked through the glass at the floor of suits outside. Every face blank. Straight. Not one looked in their direction. Later, standing outside in the thick city heat, Jonathan opened his phone and pulled up Amara's last journal entry. "If anything happens to me, it won't be random." Her voice wasn't gone. It was waiting. The report came in a thin manila envelope, delivered by courier. No seal, no formal letterhead. Just a stack of photocopied pages clipped together with a rusted paperclip. Jonathan sat in his home office. Blinds drawn. The room dim. A half-empty glass of bourbon trembled beside him on the desk as he thumbed through the autopsy summary. Blunt force trauma, head and chest injuries. No defensive wounds. Cause of death, vehicular collision, but it didn't make sense. Amara's journal days before the alleged crash mentioned bruising on her ribs, headaches, a persistent nosebleed. She even described being shoved against a wall in a courthouse stairwell. None of that was listed. Nothing predating the crash. It was as if her body told no story at all, but Amara always told stories in paper. In court and now from the grave, he picked up the phone. The office of Dr. Helen Reyes smelled of antiseptic and coffee grounds. The walls were lined with anatomical charts, sterile cabinets, and a single metal file drawer labeled confidential. In red, she was a forensic pathologist with a reputation for taking on cases no one else wanted, especially those that came with heat. Jonathan sat across from her, eyes bloodshot, fists clenched in his lap. "You reviewed the file?" he asked. She nodded, pulling it closer. "I did, and to be blunt, Mr. Hale, this isn't a proper autopsy. It reads like a template. Incomplete. No toxicology report, no bone scans, no photographs." She tapped the corner of the form. "See, this code here? That's a state shortcut used when a full report isn't required, usually in closed casket cases. But Amara was cremated, Jonathan said. Dr. Reyes leaned forward. Exactly, and that's where it gets more disturbing. She pulled out another paper copy of the cremation certificate. The signature at the bottom looked off, the ink slightly lighter than the rest. This signature, she said, belongs to a retired coroner. He hasn't practiced in 3 years. It's been forged. Jonathan stared at the document, his hand trembling slightly as he took it. So whose body was cremated? He asked. Dr. Reyes was quiet for a long moment. Then, I can't say. But the chain of custody for the body is broken, which means we can't verify that the woman who was autopsied or cremated was your wife. The words echoed like a hammer strike. She was taken from you, Mr. Hale, and someone covered their tracks very well. That night, Jonathan filed the formal request. He wanted the grave opened. He needed the coffin, what was inside it, unearthed. Not just for answers, but for her. If there was a body, he had to know. And if there wasn't. The morning of the exhumation was gray and wet, as if the earth itself recoiled at what was about to be revealed. Rain had turned the cemetery grounds into a soft mire. Workers moved carefully, boots sinking into mud, shovels breaking through. The topsoil with dull, repetitive thuds. Jonathan stood beneath a black umbrella, shoulders hunched against the wind. A court order had granted the dig. What he hadn't anticipated was the crowd reporters pressed against the police perimeter. Cameras trained on the scene, murmurs swelling like an oncoming tide. A quiet pit yawned open before him. The coffin was lifted gently, reverently, as though Amara might still be inside, waiting. But when the lid creaked open, the cemetery fell silent, empty. No remains, no remains, no clothes. Just the faint smell of treated wood and formaldehyde. Jonathan dropped to his knees. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was slow, his body folding in on itself like a man giving up a secret he didn't know he'd kept. His palms hit the mud. A low sound left his throat, halfway between grief and fury. They hadn't buried her. They had erased her. That night, the footage hit every major outlet. Widowed billionaire discovers wife's grave empty in stunning twist, pundits speculated. Some blamed a clerical error. Others spun conspiracy theories, but Jonathan didn't care about headlines. He cared about the woman who vanished while the world watched. He was in the back of a cafe in Bed-Stuy the next evening when she walked in trench coats soaked, gray locks pulled back in a low twist, eyes sharp like broken glass. Margot Levesque, she said, sliding into the booth. I was NYPD, 29 years, retired. Saw your story. I believe you. Jonathan studied her face, weathered but unshaken. She wasn't offering comfort. She was offering war. Why? He asked. She leaned forward. Because I've seen this before. Woman of color gets too loud, too close to something they want buried. She disappears. No closure. Just silence. You're the exception. Because of your last name. Because you have a platform. He said nothing, letting the words settle. I tracked 3 similar cases during my last years on the force. All black women. All attorneys or activists. All declared accidental deaths. But things didn't add up. Autopsies lost. Reports altered. No follow-up. Why didn't you say something then? He asked. She met his gaze, unapologetic. Because back then, I still needed my pension. Jonathan looked down at his hands. She was scared. He said softly, she wrote it down. All of it. But she never told me directly, and I didn't ask. Margot's tone softened just slightly. That's how they do it. Make you feel like silence is safer. They wear you down until you stop talking. And when that doesn't work, they make you disappear. He swallowed. Help me find her, Margot nodded. Already started. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the city pulsed with a strange energy. The kind that came before storms. Amara wasn't just gone. She had been taken. And Jonathan was done grieving. He was ready to fight. The hallway leading to Margot's basement office was narrow, dim, and lined with filing cabinets that looked like they hadn't been opened in years. It didn't feel like a space for justice. It felt like a bunker, a place people retreated. 2. When the world refused to listen, Jonathan followed silently, ducking slightly under a rusted pipe. When Margot opened the door, he stopped cold. The walls were covered floor to ceiling in pinned articles, faded photos, scribbled notes, maps, timelines. Faces stared back, young, old, smiling, serious, proud, all black, all women. A mosaic of lives interrupted. Margot crossed the room, flipping on a desk lamp that cast everything in a dim amber glow. 12 cases, she said, all in 10 years. Different cities, different circumstances, but the same story. They went missing. No real investigation. Paperwork buried. Family told to move on. Jonathan walked to the far wall. Photo of a woman in a graduation cap caught his eye. Tutu maybe smiling wide. Beneath her image. Reese-2018 ruled suicide. No autopsy. He turned to Margot. Why haven't we heard their names? She didn't hesitate, 'cause no one wants to hear them. Not unless there's a video. Not unless there's a protest. And even then, her voice dropped. There are names I keep in my sleep because no one else will. Jonathan scanned the wall. Why all lawyers? 'Cause we fight back, she replied. 'Cause we know the rules and the loopholes. Amara wasn't the first to dig too deep. She won't be the last. He stared at the photos. The overlapping clippings with headlines like promising career cut short and police ruled death accidental. They all had different endings, but the silence was the same. I didn't know, he whispered. Margot's gaze didn't waver. You weren't meant to. Jonathan stepped back, the weight of it pressing into his chest. This wasn't just about Amara anymore. This was a pattern, a system. A wound left open because no one dared name the blade. He looked at the wall again. Jaw tightening. He would start naming them. The room was dark, lit only by the blue glow of Jonathan's laptop. Rain streaked down the windows, city lights smeared into motionless rivers. His fingers hovered above the keyboard, breath shallow. Margot sat across from him, silent, watchful. The encrypted drive had been tucked inside a hollowed law book Amara kept on her office shelf. It had taken hours and one old email password to unlock. Inside, a single folder, titled Insurance. There were documents, files, and then an audio file. Timestamps, 14 minutes long. He clicked play. Rustling. Distant laughter. Unknown male voice, number 1. She thinks she's smarter than us. Unknown male voice number 2. Doesn't matter. Paper trail's gone. And she's next if she doesn't shut up. Laughter. Voice number 1. You know we could make her disappear. Voice number 2. Who's gonna care? It's just another angry black chick. With a cause. Pause. Amara's voice, calm but urgent. If you're hearing this, it means they tried to bury me, literally or otherwise. I collected everything. I kept records. I won't be erased. Jonathan froze. Her voice cut through him like a blade clear, steady, defiant. He clicked upload. The audio hit the internet like a bomb. Within hours, news tickers flashed across the bottom of every major network. New evidence in missing. Lawyer case. Secret recording exposes police corruption. Protests erupted downtown. Hashtags flooded social media. His inbox exploded. Then came the backlash. 2 corporate sponsors dropped out of Helltech within 48 hours. Board members called emergency meetings. Commentators accused him of fabricating the audio for attention. Then came the calls with no voice. On the other end, the unmarked black car parked across from his home. He started sleeping on Margot's couch with a loaded bat beside him. He stared at the screen as Amara's voice played on a loop. I won't be erased. She hadn't just predicted this moment. She had prepared for it. And now, the world was finally listening by the time the trial began. The city had changed. Storefronts downtown were boarded up in anticipation. Schools closed. Early. Helicopters hovered low. Cameras pointed at the courthouse like it was a war zone. But in the chaos, there was something else. two murals of Amara, painted across brick walls and bus stops, her face surrounded by words like truth, fighter, and never silenced. The morning of the first hearing, thousands marched. Margot, Yalin, and dozens of grassroots organizers had brought people together, activists, students, parents, strangers bound by shared anger and love. Jonathan walked in the middle, hoodie up, eyes forward. He didn't speak, didn't need to. The crowd spoke for him. Chants echoed off concrete. Say her name, Amara Ross. No justice, no peace. The courthouse steps were covered in flowers. Protest signs leaned against barricades. Across the plaza, an 8-foot mural of Amara towered above the crowd, her eyes unflinching. Inside, it was colder. Two officers stood at the defense table, expressionless. Neither looked at Jonathan when he entered. The judge called the court to order, and the silence inside swelled like a held breath. Then they called him to the stand. He adjusted the mic with shaking fingers. The courtroom watched. Reporters, activists, family. Amara's mother sat in the front row, back straight, hands clasped tight. State your relationship to the victim. Jonathan's voice cracked, then steadied. I was her husband. He took a breath. She warned me. I didn't listen. The prosecutor nodded. What did she say? She said she felt watched. The people wanted her quiet. She left behind files, evidence, a recording. She knew what she was walking into. She kept walking anyway. He glanced down, then back up. I didn't see it at the time. But silence was never safety for her. It was a cage they wanted. The door shut. He felt the weight of every eye in the room. They didn't just try to kill her body, he said softly. They tried to erase her voice. We're here to make sure they fail. Outside tensions were rising. Police in riot gear flanked the street. Chants turned to cries. Someone threw a water bottle. A line advanced, but across the courthouse steps. A girl knelt, placing a bouquet of sunflowers below Amara's mural. Merce. She looked no older than 12. Amid the noise, the violence, the shouts, there was a moment brief and whole where hope breathed. The verdict came on a gray Thursday morning. Cameras lined the courthouse steps like vultures. Crowds gathered in hushed anticipation. The silence heavier than the chants that had echoed there for weeks. Inside the courtroom, Jonathan sat beside Margot, his fingers digging into the wooden bench as the four-person stood. Guilty on 2 counts of obstruction. Not guilty on manslaughter. Only one officer convicted. The other walked free. There was no gasp, no outburst, just a collective exhale, bitter and broken. Jonathan closed his eyes. It wasn't justice, not fully, but it was something. Crack in. The silence. Beginning. In the weeks that followed, Amara's name refused to fade. Protests continued. Editorials poured in. College students quoted her in speeches. The mural on the courthouse wall stayed untouched. No vandalism, no removal. People lit candles there each night, but it wasn't enough to mourn. It had to matter. Jonathan sold his stake in Helltech. With the funds, he launched the Amara Foundation, a nonprofit offering legal support to women of color facing systemic abuse, discrimination, and retaliation. Margot agreed to serve as its lead investigator. Yalin came on as outreach director. They opened the doors on a quiet Monday. The space was small, 2 offices and a modest meeting room, but it was warm. Sunlight streamed through tall windows. Books lined the shelves. A mural of Amara graced the entryway wall, painted from a photograph Jonathan had taken of her the year they married. At the heart of the center, beneath soft lights and glass casing, sat her journal. It's open to a single page. They don't get to erase me. I won't make it easy for them. Later that afternoon, a girl stepped into the center alone. She was maybe 10. Hair in 2 neat braids, a backpack swinging from one shoulder. She lingered near the mural, tracing the edge of Amara's painted smile with her eyes. Jonathan spotted her and walked over, kneeling to her level. "Can I help you?" he asked gently. She held up a worn paperback Amara Ross. Essays for Justice, dog-eared. Underlined, loved. "I read this for school," she whispered, voice barely audible. I want to be like her. Jonathan swallowed the lump in his throat. You already are. She looked up at him, eyes bright, and smiled. Outside, the city kept moving. Horns blared, sirens passed. But inside the foundation's walls, something sacred held. Amara had never truly left. She had only multiplied her voice carried in others now, louder than ever.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.